Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To everyone who is joining us, Assalamu alaikum. Please comment where you are logging in from. So inshallah we can see the vast amount of countries, mashallah, that everyone's logging in from. This is the Go Memorize session 2. So this is a continuation of the webinar that happened last week on Saturday. MashaAllah, we have people from the UK, London, Chicago, Belgium, Philippines, MashaAllah, Saudi, USA, Ghana. Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah, everyone across the world has a love for the Quran, and subhanallah, everybody wishes to memorize it. Wales, Albania, mashallah, Nigeria, Malaysia, welcome to everybody. Leicester, mashallah, Toronto, Egypt, mashallah, Mauritius, Scotland. Alhamdulillah, welcome to everyone. So inshallah, as I said previously, this is the Go Memorize session 2 that will be delivered by Sheikh Ahsan Hanif. Today's topic is all about the how of memorizing. So last week was an introduction to the program, but Sheikh didn't really go into detail on the methods that will be presented. So inshallah, the Sheikh will go over the methods today, and you can choose, inshallah, which method is best suited to yourself. And please make use of the Q&A function. Sheikh Ahsan is here, inshallah, and the team are here to answer all of your questions. So if you look at the menu bar at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A tab. You can ask all your questions there, inshallah, and Sheikh Ahsan at the end of this webinar will be answering those questions, inshallah, if time permits. So without any further delay, I will now hand over to Sheikh Ahsan Hanif.
جزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له إله الأولين والآخرين، وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله المصطفى الأمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، أما بعد. So welcome everyone to our second webinar, or part 2 of our training program, which inshallah ta'ala to the launch of Go Memorize is going to be extremely important today. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be speaking about the actual manner of memorization, the method that inshallah ta'ala we are going to be adopting throughout the month of Ramadan. And so this is really the practical side of what we did. So last week was more about the theory, the importance of it, the reason why we need to memorize the Quran, the reason why it is extremely important for us to memorize the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be speaking about the actual method that inshallah ta'ala we're going to be employing. So let us begin bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So today's webinar is more about understanding the how. And with that in mind, it's important for us to know that there are many ways to memorize the Quran. There are many methods and many successful methods of memorizing the Quran. I touched upon this last week. For a couple of minutes, we spoke about the importance of this. One of the things that's important for us to remember is that not every single method is made for every single person. And the reason why we have so many different methods is because some of them will suit you and some of them won't. And so it's very important that you choose the method that works for you. Now, for most of us, we never went through a process of learning different methods. We weren't really told about how to memorize the Quran. And so therefore, when it comes to the methods of memorizing the Quran, we don't really have other than the one that we either develop ourselves, like we just kind of wing it, and it's the one that therefore we just make, or the one that our teacher maybe tells us. And usually our teachers in Quran, they're going to use the method that worked for them or that their teachers taught them. So they don't really have much access to the different methods of memorizing the Quran. Some of those methods require from you a great deal of work, so they require from you a great deal of reading, a great deal of what is a great deal of reading, a great deal of memorization, a great deal of effort, and some of them less so. So what Go Memorize is about giving you the method that inshallah ta'ala is going to work for the vast majority of people. So I don't know what's wrong with the microphone. It should be fine. But I can see some people saying that there's an issue with the sound, so I will try to bring it closer to me. So the idea behind this is we're going to, inshallah ta'ala, give you a method today that will work for the vast majority of people. It's going to be the method that, inshallah ta'ala, as I said last week, is the one that has been tried and tested many a time. And so, really, as I said last week, we need you to trust the method. We need you to trust the process. We need you to just kind of go with the program, inshallah ta'ala, in the way that we tell you to go. And so, therefore, inshallah ta'ala, I hope that by the end of today's webinar, you'll have a very good idea of what is required, a good idea of not only what is required, but in terms of what you have to do. And in terms of, inshallah, hopefully, you'll be able to see how the month of Ramadan will work, right, how it will work out. As I also mentioned, inshallah ta'ala, we're actually starting this program on Monday, so not tomorrow, but the day after. And so the reason for that also, inshallah ta'ala, become very clear today. And then as we mentioned a few days ago on the Telegram group, we're going to send out a poll also after this day, asking you to, now that you understand the method and you watch the method, to kind of tell us the timings that most suit you depending on your time zone, the timing that generally you would be available inshallah ta'ala, to participate in the live drop-in sessions. But all of this will become clear, inshallah ta'ala, throughout today. And as we've said before, if you have any questions, we have a Q&A tab which you can use on the Telegram, or you can post your questions here, which would be easier. If you're on the Zoom, you can just post your questions, inshallah ta'ala, and then inshallah we'll get through as many as we can today. Okay. There are three parts to memorizing the Quran, three distinct parts of memorizing the Quran. The first of them is your daily memorization, or the target verses that you are memorizing. So it's not necessarily daily, as we will see, but it's the target verses that you are memorizing. That's the first part. The second part, as you can see in the three cogs of memorization, is the new revision. This is your recent memorization, what you've been memorizing over the last few days. And then finally, you have the old revision, and that is what you have memorized previously. These three go hand in hand, as you can see on the diagram. They're three cogs of the wheel. All of them are extremely important components in memorizing the Quran. And so what we want to do is we want to, inshallah ta'ala, take you on a journey throughout this month of Ramadan that will introduce each of these core components. Each one of them is extremely important. One, obviously, because of the first one, because of the importance of memorization, and the other two because of the importance of retention. Because what you memorize, you want to make sure that, inshallah ta'ala, you have for the long term as opposed to for the short term. We're going to focus today on the first cog, which is the big one, and that is how to memorize the Quran. The other two we will introduce, inshallah ta'ala, throughout the month of Ramadan. Maybe in week one or week two, we'll go into this in more detail. I know some of the questions that have come on the Telegram group have been about the revision cycle. I can understand that some of you are slightly more advanced. You've memorized already some of the Quran, maybe a few juz, maybe a good number of surahs, and so therefore that's something which is obviously very important to you. I understand that, but at the same time, you have many people on this group and many people on this program that are new to this, and so we don't want to overwhelm people. Number one, we don't want to we don't want to uh, give a system like an overload of information. We want to take people through a very simple step-by-step process. Inshallah ta'ala, as I said again, and I will keep repeating this, trust us, inshallah, to take you through this program. And with time and patience, inshallah, you will see the benefits of doing so. That's not to diminish the importance of new revision or old revision. They're extremely important. And so we will focus on that. It will be a focus of the program, inshallah ta'ala, but it's going to be a gradual focus. We will build it into the cycle to teach you how, with this method, you revise also, because just as there are methods of memorizing the Quran, there are different methods of revision of the Quran. And so we have to choose the two methods that kind of align with one another. So if you're choosing a methodology for memorization, well, you need to choose a system methodology for the revision of the Quran. Okay, so um, I don't know why the volume is low. So some people are saying the volume is low. I would suggest if you can use headphones or something. I have the microphone as close to me as I can possibly get, and I don't know. And some of the people are saying the voice is fine. So maybe the issue is from your side. Okay. Um, so let us move on. These are the three steps to our method. We're going to go through each one of them in detail, but as you can see on the screen, there are three steps. The first step is to choose a pathway, to choose a goal. We're going to speak about that in a bit more detail, but I think for many of you, you've probably already done this. We sent out a poll about this a few days ago. I think many people responded to that, alhamdulillah. So that's something which you should have already done. If not, no problem. You can choose it within the next day or two. I will explain what the three pathways are again, so you can make that choice. The second step, and again, we'll go through this in detail, this revision or this memorization method rather, relies heavily on repetition, but it differs from other programs. Usually, the way people memorize the Quran is that there is a pressure to memorize every single day. So, if you're memorizing 3 lines, you're memorizing 4 verses, you're memorizing half a page, you're memorizing 1 page, or whatever your amount of new lines or verses is, there is usually a pressure to memorize that on a daily basis or at least 4 to 5 times a week. For example, some people will take the weekends off. Most children that go to a madrasa or an Islamic school or a hifz school, this is the method that they are expected to have. And most of us therefore feel that pressure because this is the most common method of memorizing the Quran. And that is that every day you memorize something, that you're constantly memorizing. The problem, not the problem necessarily, but the hardship or the difficulty in this is that number one, not everyone has such a good ability to memorize. Not everyone finds it easy to be able to read and memorize on a daily basis a number of verses or half a page or a page. Another aspect to this method that many people use is that it's very difficult for people to keep that up and maintain it. So sometimes you can do it for a day or two or three, but to do that day in, day out over a process of weeks and months is something which becomes very difficult. Another drawback to this method is that if you're not very disciplined and so you miss a day or you miss 2 days, your whole schedule now gets messed up because you haven't reached the targets for that week, and it's going to have a domino effect on everything else that you're doing. There are many reasons why. This method, by the way, is a good method. I memorized the Quran in that method. Many people did. So the issue isn't the method necessarily, but the problem is that for many of us now, because of how busy we are and the many other demands on our time, and also even for our youngsters, to be fair, for many of our children, they find it difficult to memorize the Quran in that way. This method also therefore requires, the method that people usually use, not the one that we're going to teach you about, but the one that people usually use. Also, there's a heavy pressure to revise because you're constantly memorizing new lines. So the pressure to revise what you've memorized is also very heavy. And that's why people that use that method, the common method, will memorize a lot, but they will often forget a lot also. And that's why I've seen some of the messages again when I was looking today. Some people were saying that they've memorized surahs, but they've forgotten it. Well, that's probably one of the reasons, because the way that you were memorizing, there was a pressure that you have to revise. So either you're continuing to progress in memorization or you're going to struggle to revise. And that choice between the two is sometimes very difficult to make. What is the method that we're going to, and inshallah, I'll go through this in more detail, every single step. It is heavy on repetition and reading, and therefore it makes it easier to memorize. Now, you are probably, if you use this method and you're already using a number of or memorizing a number of lines or pages or whatever it is a week, you can actually use the same method to get the same result. It's just the methodology is different. So you're not actually memorizing less. It's just that you're consolidating all of your repetition and you're consolidating your memorization. And therefore, step three, as you can see, is on the weekend, you will memorize the verses together. And as we go through this in more detail, I think it will become very clear what each of these steps means. So let's start with step number one, choosing a goal. What we did a few days ago, as I said, is we gave you 3 pathways that we're going to offer for Go Memorize, just so that, because when we looked at all of the people that have signed up for this program, alhamdulillah, as you've seen, we have many, many people, walillahi alhamd. We wanted to choose we wanted to segment this in a way that would make it easier for people, depending on their levels and abilities that we asked them about. So we've chosen 3 pathways. The first pathway is for those people that are beginners, those people that haven't memorized much of the Quran. Maybe this is the first time that they really want to get into a serious program. You can choose 5 surahs from the last 14 odd chapters of the Quran. So from Surah Nas up until Surah Zalzala. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. You can choose 5. So throughout the month of Ramadan, you will do 5 in total. And again, this is something, inshallah ta'ala, which will help you when it comes to understanding the method. The second pathway is Surah Al-Mulk. So maybe you've memorized those 14 surahs already. Maybe you've memorized half a juz. Maybe you've memorized a juz. And now you want to challenge yourself to do about half a page a week. Half a page a week is what we're targeting for you. So you will go onto the Surah Mulk pathway. We'll divide Surah Al-Mulk over the month of Ramadan. And inshallah, by the end of it, you will memorize Surah Al-Mulk. By the way, in all of these pathways, the method is the same, number one. Number two, we want to train you to learn the method. That's one of the main objectives of Go Memorize, to teach you the method so that you can continue with it after Ramadan. We're just choosing different pathways to show you how the method works because obviously are of different abilities and different levels of memorization of the Quran. The third one is you choose your own number of lines from any surah. That's the third pathway. So if you've already memorized Surah Mulk, you've already memorized, the last half juz of the Quran or whatever it may be, you don't fit into category one or two, pathway one or two, you will choose number three. So for example, someone wants to memorize Surah Al-Duha. وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. That's not in pathway one or two. You will go to pathway three. You choose which surah you want. You choose how many lines. And so you can do 3 lines, you can do 5 lines, you could do half a page, you could do a page. It is totally up to you. And so the reason why we've restricted pathway one and two is because we're going to give them support. And we can only give support in a way that is defined. Like we can't just give open support because if people have different levels of ability, it would make it very difficult to cater for every single person. We have, mashallah, nearly 2,000 people, over 2,000 people now signed up for Go Memorize. That's going to be difficult to cater for everyone. So we're trying to group people together. So if you're on pathway one and two, we can give you more support. If you're in pathway three, it means that you've already memorized a good deal of the Quran, even if it's a juz or two juz or half a juz. Like you know how to do it. You just need help with finding a method, inshallah ta'ala, and that is what we will do bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So what you will do is you will have the target verses that you are going to memorize. These target verses that you are memorizing, they are going to be the number of verses that you are repeating for that week, depending on the pathway that you have chosen. So, for example, you're memorizing half a page. You're memorizing the first half page of Surah Al-Mulk. You are memorizing Surah An-Nas. You're memorizing whatever you're choosing. You will, that will be your target verses. We will call that your target verses. That is what you are going to be repeating and focusing on for that duration of the week. So we are only targeting on a weekly basis. Your target is not a daily target, it is a weekly target. That's one of the differences between this method and other methods. We are targeting a weekly amount. So, like I said, if you're on pathway one and two, will give you the targets. If you're on pathway three, you can choose the number of lines to be your target. So you have slightly more flexibility. But you should always choose something that you think is manageable for you or slightly ambitious. You want to be slightly ambitious, that's good. But make sure that it's something which is ambitious to the extent that it is realistic for you to achieve, as opposed to being too difficult. One of the benefits of this method, as you see, is that once you have the method down and you understand it, over time you will gradually be able to increase, just as you would with the normal method. With every method, as you get used to the method and the memorization routine, you start to increase the number of verses that you do. This is exactly the same. With this method, inshallah ta'ala, over time, you will also start to memorize more and more verses as you get used to the method, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So, pathway one is the short surahs. As we said, your target ayahs will be one short surah from Surah Zalzala. So, we're going to say, for the sake of, just for the sake of an example, someone wants to memorize the last 5 surahs of the Quran. So, we're going to say, week one, you're doing Surah Al-Nas. Week two, you're doing Surah Al-Falaq. Week three, you're doing Surah Al-Ikhlas. Week four, you'll do the other 2 surahs, which is Al-Masad and Al-Nasr. And so by the end of Ramadan, inshallah, you will have done 5. Why are we increasing it slightly in the last week? Maybe a bit more. Same thing with Surah Al-Mulk, because Surah Al-Mulk is just over 2 pages, so you'll do half a page for 3 weeks. On the last week, you'll do slightly over half a page, because it's going to be, inshallah ta'ala, the last 10 days of Ramadan. And as our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do in the last 10 days, he would do more, and he would engage in more worship, and he would excel more, and he would put more effort in. So we're going to, inshallah ta'ala, mimic that to the best of our ability when it comes to the month of Ramadan and our program of Go Memorize. Pathway 2, as we said, is Surah Al-Mulk. So inshallah, you're going to be doing half a page a week. So we will tell you from which verse to which verse every single week. That will be your target verses when it comes to pathway number two. And then with pathway number three, as you can see here, this is pathway number two. So for example, week number one will be the first 5 verses. You can see the X, that's half a page. The normal Mus'haf, or the Mus'haf, which is the Saudi printed one, which I think many people probably have access to, either the physical copy or the electronic copy, has 15 pages on the Quran. Sorry, 15 pages on, 15 lines on a page, I should say. 15 lines on a page. And so therefore the halfway point is going to be 7 to 8 lines, depending on where the end of the verse is. So sometimes it will be 7, sometimes it will be 8. So there's going to be a degree of flexibility because obviously we're going to stop at the end of a verse. We chose Surah Al-Mulk, as I mentioned last week, because of the many virtues of this surah. And I think it is something which is a good goal. For those of you that have memorized a good number of small surahs, you want to now see how this method really works. Inshallah, it will give you a very good idea of how to practically use this method, inshallah ta'ala, within the 4 week period. Number three, the third pathway is you choose your own number of lines. So, for example, you're choosing half a page. So you can see Surah An-Najm there. So likewise, you'll do the same thing. You'll go half a page. That's like about 16, 17 verses. That's what you're going to do. So you choose your own number of lines. It could be less than half a page. We're not putting a limit on it. We're not giving you a minimum or a maximum. This is for you to determine. So we're expecting you now to have slightly more ability to memorize, like you've had more experience in this. So we don't need to tell you how much to memorize. That's something, inshallah ta'ala, which you can do. You may be slightly more. You may do the whole page. So you may say, I'm going to go all the way to the end of the page because I can do that much. No problem. That's what you can do. You can do that. You can do more than a page, up to about 2 pages, inshallah ta'ala, we will help you with. More than that, I think, I mean, you can do more than that if that's what you want to do. But if you're doing probably more than 2 pages, I would say that inshallah ta'ala, you are someone who is at the very high end of this program. And I don't really know if you need much from us in terms of support, because 2 pages is very good in terms of a memorization amount. But you're welcome to do that if that is something which you want to do. But I think for most people on pathway number three, I think they're probably going to be targeting between half a page and 1 page, and Allah knows best. So that's the first step. So the first step, as we said, is you're going to choose your pathway, and you're going to choose within that pathway. If it's step number three or pathway number three, you're going to choose the amount of your lines. The pathway should really be determined by you in terms of what you think is realistic for you. As I said, be slightly ambitious by all means, and also depending on your level. So if you're someone that's hardly ever memorized before, I wouldn't recommend that you go into pathway three or even two. I would say go to pathway one. If you memorize those 14, 15 last surahs of the Quran, then I think pathway two is very good for you. And if you've done like a juz or two, then I would say you can choose somewhere else of the Quran. And that can be anywhere, by the way. It doesn't have to be a surah that you're going to finish in Ramadan. You can say, I want to start with Baqarah. So you'll get like a page done, 4 pages done by the end of Ramadan. For example, we just want to teach you the method. For us, the goal isn't how much you memorize by the end, it's that you understand a method of memorization and revision that inshallah ta'ala you can continue with after the month of Ramadan. Okay, step number two. What is it that you're going to do now that you've chosen your target verses? You know your pathway, you know your target verses. You're going to repeat this 20 times a day for 5 to 6 days. Our repetition days are going to be Monday to Friday, with Saturday for those people that need some extra time. But I think for the vast majority, 5 days is more than enough. If you are repeating the verses 20 times a day for 5 days, that is 100 repetitions. That's what this method is. The method is for you to repeat again and again and again and again. When someone is memorizing verses on a daily basis, there is a pressure there that they need to memorize. So they will repeat the verses 10 times, 15 times, 20 times, and now they need to memorize because they need to finish. They need to get their lines done because they're busy, they have jobs, they have studies, they have other things to do. There is a pressure on you to do that. With this method, there's no pressure. Because if you do 20 times, there's no memorization at the end of day one or day two or day three. And like with everything, the more that you repeat something, the better. Now, for me personally, we've said 20 times because that is, I think, a very good number. If you can do more, I would say do more. But again, it's meant to be low pressure. So don't put yourself in that position where you said, I'm going to do 30, 35 a day, and then you can't sustain that. If you can't sustain it, stick to the 20. If you can do slightly more, it's good, inshallah ta'ala, no problem. And in Ramadan, if you have that extra time and energy, then I would recommend that you do more. But again, 20 is the minimum that we want. And the good thing is that it's flexible, so you have 5 days to do that. So maybe Monday I do 20, Tuesday I do 20, on Wednesday I have some more time, so I did 30. But on Thursday, I go back to 20. It is flexible in that way. One of the other benefits of this method is that if on Monday I'm slightly busy, so I only got to do 15, well, then on Tuesday I can do 25. So it gives you that leeway, that flexibility, because as I said last week, for most people now, the reason why they don't memorize the Quran is because of other pressures. And sometimes those pressures mean that they can't actually commit the time that they would like to the Quran in terms of its memorization. So what you do then is that you just make that flexible schedule for yourself through the weekdays. So from Monday to Friday, we want you to repeat. How do you repeat? Well, you can see on the screen, the repetition is done by looking, always. You're going to read from the Quran. You're going to open the Mus'haf and the Quran, and you will read it by looking, not from memory. You will read it by looking, because we want you to retain it not only verbally, but also in terms of visually. And that's one of the benefits of this method. The more senses that you use, the easier it becomes to memorize the Quran. It is common in certain countries that they make their students write the Quran as well, because that's an extra sense that you're using, an extra skill that you're using. And so it's going to make your retention even stronger. We obviously aren't going to ask you to write the Quran, because most of us don't have the ability to do that. So we want you to read it though. Don't just listen to it, put on a cassette player and you'll just know. We want you to read the Quran. That's very important for us. So that's something which is very important. You're going to repeat your lines, your target verses from beginning to end aloud. That is one repetition. So for example, I'm doing Surah An-Nas. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. That's one repetition. Keep a tally. Mark it off, number one. Then do it again the second time. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Again, the whole surah. Keep a tally. That's number two. You will do this 20 times a day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, I don't need to tell you, because most of us have had this personal experience, that when you just listen to a surah 20, 30, 40, 50 times, you can kind of guess, or you kind of know what's going to come next in the surah. You've kind of memorized it almost. You're very familiar with that surah. The thing with the Quran is that we're familiar with the surahs that we love to listen to all and all of the time. But for the rest of the Quran, because we don't listen to it regularly enough, we're not so familiar. With this method, though, you will become familiar, because you're going to make those repetitions 100 times. But you're going to space them out, because if I said you do 100 a day, well, that's too difficult for most people. So you're going to space that out over the 5 days of the week. So that is basically what we want you to do every single day, 20 repetitions. You can do more, you shouldn't really do less unless you're very busy, in which case you can make up the ones that you missed onto the next day, as I explained a short while ago. So, as I said before, we want you to do active reading. Active reading, number one, means that you're actually looking at the Mus'haf. Number two, it means that you're going to use trigger words if that's what you need, because for certain people, for example, it will help them if there's a story behind the surah, if they look at a short tafsir, if they look at the translation, if they remember some key words. So one of the things that we're going to do, inshallah ta'ala, is for pathway 1 and 2, we're going to give you some extra support. So for pathway 1, we're actually going to, inshallah ta'ala, we're in the process of doing each of those surahs in pathway 1, word for word. Because we have some people with us that they're not very fluent in reading the Quran, or maybe they're new Muslims and they can't really read the Quran. So we're going to break up the word for word recitation of those surahs so that you can just follow. So you're looking and you're following the reading as well. We'll give you that support, inshallah ta'ala. You'll find those videos on our YouTube channel, and we'll post links on the Telegram too. That's going to be extra support. We'll also give not as much support, but some support to those of you on pathway number 2 with Surah Al-Mulk. So maybe we will do some Zoom sessions where, for the first day or two, we can do it together. So whoever can make the call at that time, we can do it together. So inshallah ta'ala, hopefully that's something which will help as well. Another good idea for you also is to test yourself as you progress. So, for example, when you get to day number 3 or 4 or 5 now, day 4 or 5 of your repetitions, when you can start doing mini testing. So you're not memorizing, but what you're going to do, for example, is you're going to cover up the beginning of the verse or the end of a verse, and you're going to try to guess what it was. So you're just, this is all active reading. What we don't want you to do is play it and you're busy, or you're trying to read but you're distracted. That's not going to help you with this method. It requires you to have active reading. Active means that you are engaged in your brain, not that you've got something else you're watching on in your in the background, or something playing in the background, or you're on your phone at the same time as you're trying to read. We need you to do 20 times. Now, for most people, 20 repetitions a day, I don't think will take you more than half an hour to 1 hour maximum. We want you to read slowly and clearly. So don't rush the recitation. Don't read so quickly that you're done in 5 minutes, but you read in a way that wasn't quality. This is ibadah. You're going to get reward for every word of the Quran that you recite. And so spending that time, especially in the month of Ramadan, has many rewards and many virtues. So these are things that you can do. Anything that will help you with with the memorization method, I would recommend. Get a short tafsir, read the stories that are connected to these surahs. We're going to do some videos to help with pathway 1 and 2. Obviously, because pathway 3, people are doing whatever they're doing, it's very difficult for us to do. But you can use the same ideas. Look at keywords, look at translations, write down the meaning if you need to. All of this, inshallah ta'ala, you can do to help you. Active reading is very important for this method to work. Many of our when we're memorizing, when we're repeating, we just repeat, but we don't really know what we're doing. We're just on autopilot. If you have active reading for 20 repetitions and it takes you 30 minutes, it will make the world of difference, inshallah ta'ala. So, spaced repetition. Do you need to read all of them at once? No. In fact, I would recommend that you don't read them all at once, that you space it out. There's a thing called spaced repetition, and that is that when you leave a gap between when you read and then when you read again, it is stronger than when reading something all at once. So, if you were to read something in the morning and then in the evening and then again in the morning and in the evening, that would be better than just reading 20 times together in the middle of the day. And that will make it easier for you, because obviously if you're chunking up, you're breaking it down into chunks, then you don't need as much time per session. One thing that I would recommend, if you can do this, it would be very good, is if you can't do, if you can do it after every salah, it would be amazing. So I know people that do this method personally, as I mentioned last week, and this is a very common way of doing this. After you finished each one of your 5 daily prayers and you've made your dhikr, just spend 10 minutes doing 3, 4, 5 repetitions. If you did 4 to 5 repetitions after every salah, you're doing 20 to 25 times. And because it's only 4 or 5 repetitions, it doesn't even sound too much. If I say to you do 20 repetitions a day, even though I don't think it'll take you more than half an hour, number 20 sounds quite big, right? You're like 20 times, that still sounds too much. But if I say to you do four, it's okay. Everyone can do 4 or 5. It's not like a big deal. So it's not too difficult. If you can do that multiple times a day, and again, this will depend obviously on your schedule, your level of discipline, those factors, and that's why it's up to you. We aren't going to tell you how to do your 20, we just want you to do 20. I would recommend that you space it out. So even if you can't do all 5 prayers, do Fajr, do Asr, do Isha, or you're going for Taraweeh and you're like, okay, I won't be able to do after Isha in the masjid, okay, do it for the other 4 at home, whatever. You decide. But the point is that you repeat. If you can't do it with the salahs because you're going to be at work or what have you, well, then just choose another time, but just space it out. Maybe do 7 and 7 and 6, maybe do 10 and 10, maybe do 5, 4 times, however you wish to do it. But this is what I would recommend. Spaced repetition is better than just doing it all at once. And the more that you do that, inshallah ta'ala, the more familiar you will be. And that's because the brain also becomes, it requires a break. So when you're reading, if you go away and then a couple of hours later you come back, it's something which your brain will come at again, and it's more refreshed. And so that's also something which inshallah ta'ala you will benefit from. So once you've done that for the first 5 days, from Monday to Friday, we now come on to the weekend, which is step 3, and those are the memorization days. Now you can see we said the 6th or 7th day, our weekends are basically going to be our memorization days, and then reading to a teacher by heart from memory. That's what we want the weekends to be. So you have, we want people on Saturday to start reading to us. And I think for the vast majority of people, 5 days, 100 repetitions is going to be more than enough. But again, we're going to be flexible in this program. People are busy. And one of the things that we wanted to do in Go Memorize is make this flexible. The reason why we want to make this flexible, by the way, even though for us from a logistical point of view, it's going to be extremely difficult for us. The reason why we want to make it flexible is we don't want anyone to have an excuse. We don't want anyone to say that we couldn't make it. It was too strict. I couldn't do 5 days, but I could have done it where it's 6 days. So we want to make it flexible for you because we don't want shaitan to have an excuse and for you to have an excuse. Or for shaitan to give you an excuse and for you to have an excuse. So what we want from you, we're going to be slightly flexible with this, but the weekend really ideally should be the memorization days. So this is what we want from you. If you couldn't do it on a weekend, for example, some people they were sick Saturday, Sunday. This will happen. Can happen in Ramadan. You were sick that weekend. Something happened. You couldn't do it that weekend. Well, we'll say to you then just read to us on a Monday. But it is important that you start your cycle on the Monday also, the next cycle of verses. So don't do this thing where, oh, it took me 10 days now. You're going to mess up the whole program. And as I said, if you don't use the process correctly, by the end of Ramadan, the results are not going to be as we need them to be for you. And so therefore you need to follow the program. There is some flexibility built in. If you need someone, if you need someone to help you or you have some questions about that, then by all means you can ask that inshallah ta'ala. But generally speaking, follow the program. Monday to Friday is reading days. Saturday, Sunday is memorization days. As you memorize, you will read to the teacher. And when you finish reading to the teacher and you got your thumbs up, inshallah ta'ala, everything's good, then you will start your next cycle of verses. If you read on a Saturday, for example, the Sunday will be a revision day. You'll just keep going over those same verses. Monday, you will start your next batch of target verses. So, how to memorize? On the seventh day, you're going to memorize by connecting the verses together. So, for example, we're going to imagine for the purposes of this that someone is reciting or memorizing Surah Watini wa Zaytun. So Surah Watini wa Zaytun is just about under half a page. They've been reading this throughout the week, 100 repetitions or more they've done so far. On Saturday now, which is the memorization day, they're going to come to the same verses and read it again 10 times this time. 10 times by looking. 10 times by looking. Then they're going to close the Quran and read as much of it as they can by heart. Either they're going to be able to read it all, pretty much, maybe just the odd mistake, one or two, but generally they know it very well. In which case, we're going to say to them, if you can do that, then read it 5 more times, just to take out that one or two mistake. Just read it 5 more times. Once you've done that, inshallah ta'ala, that's going to be amazing. You'll have pretty much memorized it. You'll have the odd mistake here and there. It's normal. But generally speaking, your memorization will be very good. And those one or two small mistakes, then you underline them, you think of them. Those are the ones that you have to concentrate on. And if you focus on them slightly more, those will come out also. Then you will come and you will read to the teacher. You can record yourself, get someone to test you, like all of those different things that will help you to make sure that you've memorized it correctly. Please do. So that onus is on you. If you do that, so you did it 10 times by looking, you tried to read it and you find that actually it didn't work. Didn't work. That's okay, no problem. You do it the second way. The second way is what you can see in the purple box, and that is you're going to have to do it one verse at a time. So for some people, alhamdulillah, they can just do half a page or those 3, 4, 5 verses just off like that. For other people, no, they need to do each one individually. So what you will do then is you will break down the lines that you have verse by verse. So you'll do verse number 1. Watini was zaytun. You'll read it 5 times. Watini, and then you'll do it by heart 5 times. Watini was zaytun. Watini was zaytun. Watini was zaytun. I've done it 5 times. You do the next verse. Waturi sinin. Waturi sinin. Read it by looking. Read it by heart. Then join between the two. Read the two verses together by looking 3 times, and then do it once by heart. So you're combining, you're connecting. The connection is very important. And one of the benefits of the repetitions, the reason why we're telling you to do all of the verses together once and then check that as one, as opposed to doing each verse one time and doing it 20 times like that. No, you want to connect the verses. You want to flow and a connection. So you're going to do 2 verses. Then the third verse, وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ, memorize that. Then connect verses 1, 2, 3. So basically you're memorizing one verse at a time. Every time you've memorized it, you're going to connect it with the previous verses. And in that way, inshallah ta'ala, again, you'll have done the same thing. Once you've finished all of the verses, then again, by heart, just read over it 2 or 3 times for memory again, and then come and read to the teacher. That shouldn't take, again, generally speaking, half an hour to an hour again, because you should be so familiar after the 100 repetitions that it shouldn't take you for too long. So I've used this method with my children, I've used this method with other people. They can memorize, if they're active, they can memorize a page and a half within 20, 30 minutes. So if you're doing less than a page and a half, then it shouldn't take you that much longer either, but so long as you did the 5 days correctly. People think that because we're just doing reading by looking 20 times, we can just, I'll just do 15, no problem. I'll just do 10, no problem. And it might not be a problem depending on your memory. But people often try to, I will say, for the lack of a better word, cheat the system. And when you try to cheat the system, sometimes it doesn't work. And as I said last week, people then complain and say, well, the method doesn't work. It didn't work for me. And when I asked them, or we asked them in more detail, we realized that they didn't do it properly. So it's very important. You have to do it properly. Don't cheat it. You're only going to harm yourself. No one else gets affected by this. And it's ibadah, it's worship, it's Ramadan. There is nothing more blessed to be engaged in the month of Ramadan than the Quran, as our Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is step number 3 in terms of how to do the memorization. A few things in terms of the benefits of this method, which I think is very important. If you do this method correctly, firstly, number one, inshallah ta'ala, your memorization and retention will be stronger because you have looked at these verses 100 times. The normal method of memorizing something every single day, you only read it 15, 20 times, you then memorize it. Next day, you're under pressure to read the next number of lines and memorize them. You're going to revise the previous ones, but you're only going to have limited time because you're memorizing so much on a daily basis that what you're memorizing is quickly going into your revision cycle and you can't give it the due right that it deserves. I know people now, world famous reciters, who I've listened to recently, and they've said that even though they memorize in the other method, this is the one they would recommend to their students now, just from experience, just because they're older and wiser, more experienced. Because students often memorize the Quran so quickly with the normal method that by the end they're weak. There is weakness in their memorization, and they almost have to either spend 2, 3 years revising, or sometimes they like memorizing all over again because they memorized it, but they kind of forgot it. The benefit, one of the key benefits of this method is that you're actually not memorizing less. You think you're memorizing less, but if you were doing a page a week anyway, meaning every day by you're doing 3, 4 lines, and by the end of the week you're doing a page anyway, and through this method you still do the same amount. It's just that your retention of it will be stronger because you repeated those verses 100 times, possibly more. And that's why I said if you can do more, that would be easier. So easily you're doing 100 repetitions. As we said, it allows for margins of error. Some day you're sick, some days you're busy, some days you do less. You just make up for it on the following days. And over time, then, as you're doing this and your memory is getting stronger, you can add to it. You can do more lines. You can increase the amount of verses of memorization. And because most of the week is not memorization, there is less pressure. You don't have to memorize every single day. It's okay. You just read, 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 read. I know, there are certain scholars, you'd be probably surprised if I told you their names. But anyway, they told me personally that what they would do is they would read by looking for 6 days, only memorize on the Friday. They chose Friday as their day because in the Arab world, Friday is a holiday, it's a day off. And they would do that. So they would go, for example, one of them told me that he would just go for Jum'ah an hour early. That's when he would do his memorization in the masjid, going early, rewarding anyway. And so that's when he would do it. And the rest of the week, he would just do his repetitions. It is a tried and tested program. I know people that have used this method and they started memorizing in their 30s and in their 40s. That's the beauty of it. It is something which, for the vast majority of people, I'm not going to say it's perfect because there are certain people that it won't work for, because there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. Not every method works for every person every time. But from my experience, and Allah knows best, and from the people that I have heard, this is the vast majority of, it has worked for the vast majority of people. There is actually even a hadith to this effect of a similar method. There are certain companions they said that that said that they memorized verses and surahs of the Quran from how often they were repeated in the Jum'ah prayer. They would go. The Prophet ﷺ used to, every single Jum'ah, for a good period of time, he used to recite Surah Qaf, as is mentioned in a number of hadith. There are companions that said we memorize Surah Qaf just from his recitation every single week. Like most of us, سبح اسم ربك الأعلى هل أتاك حديث الغاشية. If you're hearing that every single week over months and years, you're going to be very familiar with that surah. but you probably won't be able to memorize it because it's only one repetition a week because you only hear it on Jumu'ah. This is daily repetitions. In a week, it is 100 times, and that is why it is much stronger. You'll get a good flow because again, you're reading all the verses together as opposed to two verses today, two tomorrow, two another day. To have the flow and the connection between them is difficult. And as we said, it is works for the vast majority, and it's also easier than to transition. You may find that after doing this for a year, your memory, inshallah, is mashallah, is so good now that you can actually memorize more times a week. You don't need 6 days or 5 days of repetitions to memorize. You can actually do 2 cycles. You can do 3 days of memorization, of reading, a repetition, and the fourth day you're memorizing. And so you're actually kind of building in 2 cycles a week as opposed to one. But again, anyway, we're not going to we're not going to go into that now. Just to show you that actually there is much more to this than I'm telling you now. Again, we don't want to overwhelm you with this information. We just want you to know the basics, to practice them, to train yourself, to get a good habit. And then inshallah ta'ala, after Ramadan, I hope that inshallah we will be able to, in one way or another, give you some more support, inshallah, as we continue, or hopefully you will continue with this journey, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, folks, inshallah, 5, 10 minutes more, and inshallah, we're done. Um, we're going to send out some resources as we mentioned before. So we'll give you something like this to schedule just so that you can help you. I mean, you can use your own, you don't need to use this. But if you want to, we'll send out some of this stuff for you guys so that you can, inshallah ta'ala, print this off, keep it with you, you can mark it off, and therefore, you have your weekly target, inshallah ta'ala, that you can that you can keep on. So inshallah we'll send that out on the Telegram group. I won't spend too much time on that now. Okay. The final thing which is very important is practically how is this going to work from us? What we're going to do, folks, is everything is going to be done via Zoom for Go Memorize. As I said, you're going to start, inshallah ta'ala, on Monday. Monday is when you are going to start your repetitions. So today, tomorrow, it is very important that you choose your pathway and you're very clear on this method. This video will be on YouTube, inshallah, after we finish. If you didn't understand something didn't make sense, go back and watch it again. You have any questions, please ask us tomorrow before we begin on Monday. All sessions are going to be on Zoom. We're going to segregate them or separate them for brothers and sisters. So you'll have different links. So if you're a brother, you go to the brothers one. If you're a sister, you go to the sisters one. I know it sounds obvious, but from my experience with so many people, we're going to have brothers and sisters, sisters and brothers. Please, please, just we don't need the drama. We already have, like so much to do in this program. Please don't make extra work for us because people don't, like just stick to the sessions. They may not always be the same time. They may be the same time. Just depends on the schedule of the teachers. So just be clear. For what we'll do, inshallah ta'ala, there's going to be a sisters topic. So we're going to actually set up topics called Zoom sisters and Zoom brothers on the Telegram. So if you are Zoom sister, you're a sister, you look in the Zoom sisters. If you're a brother, you look in the Zoom brothers. I can't make that any clearer, I don't think. So every week we'll release the timetable of the drop-in sessions. We're going to try to do mornings, afternoons, evenings, because people are from different time zones, people working and so on. We can't guarantee the times, so they don't always necessarily, it doesn't mean that every session will be the same every week. All our teachers, as I said last week, are volunteers. Sometimes someone's going to get busy, someone's going to get sick, just as you may be busy some days. People get busy from our teacher side also. Please be patient with us. Please be flexible. But inshallah, there will be enough time and enough sessions that if one doesn't suit you, another one will. And we're going to try to make that as easy as possible and to have as many sessions, inshallah ta'ala, as possible also. So, therefore, what do you need to do? There's going to be weekday slots and weekend slots. You don't need to pre-book. That's why they're called drop-in sessions. The pre-booking system would just be too much headache and too much admin. So they're going to be drop-in sessions. If, having said that, though, we see that there's a drop-in session that we put up that people aren't attending. So, for example, we do one, for example, after Fajr, and we find that there's like 6 people that came. Then odds are after a few days that's not going to carry on because it doesn't make sense for people to give up their time as teachers when people have families, they have work, they have all of these other things going on, and people just want to be getting on with their own ibadah also in Ramadan. And so if a session isn't busy, then we probably won't keep it going. If it is busy, obviously, then inshallah ta'ala we will. The weekday slots, then what are they for? We're going to have weekend drop-in sessions. What we want you to do in the weekend sessions is one of two things. Some people, they just need an extra amount of accountability. So some people, if I say to them, read 20 times, they're probably not going to read 20 times. They're probably going to, do 5 times and then get busy and so on. So one of the things that you can use the drop-in session for is you can drop into the Zoom session and you're just using it for your own repetitions by yourself, meaning you're not actually reading to anyone. So your camera is not going to be on, your voice is not going to be on, like your microphone. You just want to be in the classroom. And once you're there and you've done your repetitions, whether you're choosing to do 10 at that moment or 20, or you're dividing it through the day, you can drop into as many of those sessions as you want and just do your repetitions. And then you could just send a thumbs up, or you can just say, I'm done, and you can leave. Some people just need that extra accountability. The other thing you can use this drop-in session for is to read to the teacher, because it's the first time you're reading the verses. You want to make sure that your recitation is correct. You just want to read to someone, inshallah ta'ala, so that inshallah, you know that there's no major mistakes in your reading. That's what our teachers are there to help you for over those 5 days. And also, as I said, for the odd person that can't do the weekend, they didn't make it, or maybe they were too busy, or maybe they couldn't find the session that they wanted, whatever, then they could also use those sessions just to read over the verses. So that's what the weekday slots are for. We're going to give some flexibility, as I said, in that, but obviously you stick to the program. Monday to Friday is your reading repetition days, the weekend is your memorization days. Whether you can read to us or not, irrespective, you keep and stick to that program. Read to us, though, obviously, because that is important. Weekend, therefore, is the prime time, that's the busy time. The weekends, we want you to read to us, because the greatest way of making sure, or the best way of making sure that you memorize, is to read to a teacher. Self-testing doesn't work. It works to help you memorize. It doesn't work once you've memorized. People self-test all the time, and when they read to a teacher, it's full of mistakes. There are people that I've met that have led Taraweeh, and they've said, when I read it to myself, I had no mistakes. And I always say to them, yeah, because you were testing yourself. You didn't know you had the mistakes. When you read to a teacher, he or she realized that you had mistakes. So it is important to read to the teacher. Very important. How is that going to work? What we want you to do then on those days that you are reading, you're going to drop into the session once you've done the memorization. So the method that I told you of memorizing, you've done that beforehand. Now you're ready to read. Once you come in, you're going to find either the session is going to have a single teacher or multiple teachers. So some sessions we're going to have 2 or 3 teachers. Some session maybe only one teacher. If there's multiple teachers, there's going to be breakout rooms as you get in Zoom. And what will happen then is one of our admin, inshallah, will assign you to one of those breakout rooms. They're going to be randomly assigned. Or there's not going to be a breakout room because there's only a single teacher. Once you enter, you raise your hand so that we know and we can take people, inshallah, in order. Raising your hand basically means I'm ready to read. If you come into the session and you still need a few minutes just to look over it, no problem. But once you're ready, raise your hand. The teacher will then call your name and you will read to them. And if you want to be anonymous, no problem. You don't have to use your real name. You can say, I'm Abdullah, whatever. If that's what makes you comfortable, no problem. And as I said, sisters will be with sisters, brothers will be with brothers. So inshallah, we won't have any issues with those types of problems. So you'll read your verses to the teacher, and once you're done, you can leave the meeting. That's all it is. So inshallah ta'ala, hopefully that process won't be too painful, won't be too long. And so it's going to be relatively easy and quick to do. Now, obviously, because they are drop-in sessions, some sessions will be busy and some won't be. So what we'll do is every time there is a session, inshallah ta'ala, and especially on the weekends, because the weekends are going to be the ones that everyone's trying to read their memorized lines, we're going to, on the Telegram groups, going to put up a traffic light system. So our admin will update you. So for example, check the Telegram. If you see it's a green light, it means it's not very busy. If it's an amber, it means it's slightly busy. You're going to go in, but you're going to have to wait. But it's okay. You go in, it might take you half an hour or so to read, but it's okay. And if it's red, it means it's very busy. It might be worth you coming back later in that session, or coming back, at another session. And then we'll send out the program, inshallah ta'ala. So what we're going to try to do, each slot will probably be around an hour and a half. And so you'll just go to the next slot. You'll come back, later on in the slot, and we'll keep updating the Telegram group to show you, inshallah ta'ala, which of these traffic lights, and to show you the level of how busy these rooms are. And again, those will be under the topics of Zoom brothers, Zoom sisters, inshallah ta'ala, in the Telegram. This is important for you, right? So you need to do this, inshallah ta'ala. You need to work with us, cooperate with us in this way, just so that inshallah ta'ala it's going to be, easy for everyone to be on board. Okay. So we need your cooperation, we need your patience, we need your understanding. Please, like, work with us, inshallah ta'ala, for this. Uh, and inshallah ta'ala, hopefully, inshallah, it's going to work quite well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So, what is the start date? As we said, Monday, inshallah ta'ala, is the start date. That's when you're going to start your repetitions. We're not going to have any drop-in sessions up until Saturday because it's not Ramadan. This was meant to be a Ramadan program, but as I explained last week, what we wanted you to do is we wanted you to get a good run in so that we can benefit from every weekend because this year Ramadan is going to start on a weekend, and so therefore we didn't want to waste the first weekend by telling people to start in Ramadan. We want you to be ready for that first weekend of Ramadan. So we're not going to have drop-in sessions, but obviously, as I said, we will have support sessions for the people on Pathway One through videos that we're going to release. The only exception to this is that we may do a session for Pathway number two, was for Suratul Mulk. We may do something like that, but again, more information will be given. But otherwise, inshallah ta'ala, you know what you do now. You know the method. You have access to the Telegram. Any questions that you have, no problem. Ask us, inshallah ta'ala. Someone will get back to you. And so our first drop-in session will be on Saturday and Sunday. So the 1st and 2nd of March is going to be testing days. So hopefully by then you're going to test, you're going to be tested. Now, um, I don't know when Ramadan is going to be yet. It may be Saturday, it may be Sunday. Irrespective, we're going to start on Saturday. So even if Ramadan doesn't start on Saturday, we will start on Saturday again, just so that we can benefit from that first weekend. So I want to make that very clear. Saturday, the 1st of March, we're going to begin, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll send, inshallah, enough reminders bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we may even do another webinar, like just an open Q&A kind of thing, just to tell everyone just if there's any last minute issues or any questions, maybe on Thursday or something, we can do something like that. But inshallah, we'll let you know. And we'll send out the weekly hifz schedule where you can keep a tally and everything else that you require bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Um, during Ramadan, we're going to not leave you. We'll be with you every step of the way. So we're going to answer your questions. We're going to be on the Telegram. We're going to be posting things. You have access, to an amazing community as you have, inshallah ta'ala, seen. Now, ask people. If you want people to help you, ask them. Some of you ask for buddies, like to help you with the reading and memorization. No problem. That's what you want to do, you do. We can't organize that for you. It's too much admin. There's too many people. There's too many different time zones and schedules, but you can do that. If you know people on the program, you want to work with them, no problem. Other people want to do that with you, no problem. We don't have an issue with that. Anything that helps you is fine. We will do a number of webinars a week. So after Taraweeh on certain days, and again, we'll send out the schedule in Ramadan. Certain days we're going to be giving extra webinars. Those webinars are important for you to attend. And that's because we're going to be speaking about how to do the revision cycle, how to take out your mistakes. We're going to be giving webinars where we will add different components to the Hifth journey. We'll also, inshallah, have some special guests joining us in some of those webinars, just so that you can hear their stories, their experiences, people that have memorized the Quran, maybe some that have memorized later on. But inshallah, all of them are in the field of da'wah and Quran. And so, inshallah, there'll be people that you know or have heard of at the very least. And therefore, we're going to, inshallah, benefit from them. These sessions will most likely be after Taraweeh prayer, UK time. So they're going to be late evening kind of sessions, and therefore they won't be very long. And we'll also have Q&As. So, maybe a session will just be questions because maybe someone's struggling, maybe someone has some questions, maybe something's not working for them. So through being together, we can help one another and we can see what people's difficulties are. We can give them advice. We can, inshallah ta'ala, help them. And again, we'll have videos as well that, like we have on our YouTube page. I think we have Instagram, TikTok, so on all of these, inshallah, different platforms. You'll get access to this. So I would ask that you subscribe or like or follow these pages, inshallah ta'ala, so you can remain up to date bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So with that, inshallah, we'll end the presentation part here, and inshallah we will open up the question and answers. We'll hand over back to Brother Humayun.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for going over all the various different methods. So, alhamdulillah, people have started asking questions. So, the first one is, do you need wudu to recite the Quran?
You need wudu to touch the Quran and hold it. That is wajib, unless it is an electronic Quran. So if you're holding the physical Quran, you need wudu. And if you have an electric Quran, then you don't. But just to recite from memory, then no, you don't need wudu.
Okay, Sheikh, the next question. Can I change days so I do the memorization on 2 weekdays instead of weekends?
You can, because as I said, we will give people flexibility in this if that's what they need. But that's not going to be the program that we're following altogether. So as you know, for you individually, if that's what you want to do, because your schedule dictates that, then no problem. However, we as a group and as a community, we want to stick to the group because I think most people will be off on weekends, and weekdays is basically when most people are going to be working. But I understand some people that doesn't work for them. So yeah, you can do that, and that's why I said the weekday drop-in sessions are also going to have a level of flexibility in them, for those odd people that want to do something like that.
Okay, the next question. So for pathway 3, not sure what surah to choose, as they've done Surah Mulk already. What does the Sheikh advise? Maybe Surah Jummah or Surah Hujurat.
Um, you can choose any surah to be honest. If you want to do something like Surah Al-Kahf, you won't possibly finish it, but you can start it and then you can continue. If you're looking for virtues, surahs that have other virtues attached to it, so Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Kahf, or something like that, that's no problem. Or you can just choose a surah that you like listening to or recitation. So it doesn't have to be, as I said, a surah that you will necessarily finish in Ramadan. So again, it's up to you. It's like whatever you prefer to do.
Okay, how many times do you listen to a reciter in this process?
So if you want to listen to a reciter just to begin, for like you listen to someone once or twice just to make sure that your recitation is okay and is correct, that's okay. You can listen to them more than that as well, but that's not included in your repetitions. So anything that you're doing in terms of listening is extra. So if that's something which you need to do, no problem. That's something which you can do. Listen to someone three, four, 5 times, as many times as you want, if that makes you comfortable. But that's not part of your repetition. You still need to do your 20 repetitions a day.
Okay, next question. I've been doing HIFT for 8 years. I have a dynamic disability, which means that the severity of my symptoms changes from day to day, along with my stamina. Some days I can do a lot, other days only a little. Should I set a low weekly target so that I am sure that I can handle the workload, or can I adjust my goal by the time the weekend arrives?
So that's the beauty of this method. It gives you that flexibility. So if you need to start off low and then adjust and do more, you can do that. If you start off slightly higher and then you need to adjust lower, you can do that. If you find, for example, that you're starting off with a low target, and then after the first 2 weeks, you're actually like, no, I can up this now. You can do that also. So that's the beauty of this program. So what I would say is you set as I said, a realistic but slightly ambitious. So if you think you can comfortably do 5 lines, I would say maybe do 6 or 7, just to try it. Inshallah, if you try 6 or 7, you'd at least do the 5. So you've never actually gone below what your target is. In your mind, it was 5 anyway, but you're just going to be slightly ambitious. I think it would be good in Ramadan to do that. This is obviously for pathway 3. For pathway 1 and 2, we're choosing your targets for you. But for pathway 3, you can be slightly ambitious, and then if it works, alhamdulillah. If it didn't, you're still reaching your target lines. And I think in that way, inshallah ta'ala, you will be able to adjust it accordingly. And as I said, for pathway 3, if after the first 2 weeks you find, wow, this is really working for me, you can adjust it. No problem. You can do slightly more.
Okay, the next question. Does my tajweed need to be good even for level 1?
No, so you don't need good tajweed for any of these pathways. As I said, we're not really focusing on tajweed necessarily, but that would be good for you to obviously listen to a reciter and try your utmost to copy them in terms of tajweed. For level 1, because you're asking about level 1, we're going to break it down for you, word for word, inshallah ta'ala, in the videos that we will provide for those surahs. And so my best advice is to try to copy what you hear. So if you hear someone making a gunna, they're holding a sound, they're elongating, making something longer, the sound, you copy that as you hear it. That would be the best way to do it at this level.
Okay, the next question. Where can we find tafsir stories? Please, could you share some YouTube links?
Yeah, inshallah, we will do. I have a page by page tafsir that I've done. So every like a tafsir series where I am doing one page of the Quran at a time. So that's still being released. I think we're currently in terms of release on Surah Araf, maybe the eighth or ninth juz. So I know that may not work for everyone. But I am sure that there are many things out there. If you were just to YouTube this or Google it, you'll find like different like small tafsirs and short tafsirs of the surahs and so on. And maybe inshallah we'll try to send send some links and help people inshallah ta'ala.
Okay. Next question. For one page a week, does that mean repeating the whole page 20 times each day? That's too difficult. Can I repeat 2 to 3 lines each day 20 times and connect as I'm going along?
Uh, Say that again for me. I didn't.
So for the one page a week option, does that mean repeating the whole page 20 times each day? And then the person who asked the question said that's too difficult. Can I repeat just 2 to 3 lines each day 20 times and connect as I go along?
Yeah, if that's pathway three, you don't need to do a page. As I said, you choose the number of lines. So if you're doing 3 lines, that's what you're comfortable with, that's what you do 20 times. So you don't have to do a page or half a page. That was just an example. So you do what's comfortable for you. So pathway number three, you choose the number of verses. So if you, for example, want to do 3 lines a day, that's what you can comfortably do 20 times, 3 lines, 20 times a day. That's okay. And then you can slowly increase that as you go along.
Okay, the next two questions are similar. So it's asking, but how do we connect longer ayahs together? I find it difficult to do with longer ayahs, unlike 30th juz where the ayahs are short. And then the next question asks, how do we connect pages together with this method?
So in terms of pages, we'll introduce that for you. So inshallah, like one of the webinars that we will do in Ramadan, once we've done the first week or so, we will tell you how to connect now, because whether it's half a page, connecting the top half with the bottom half, or connecting one page with the next, that inshallah we will deal with in a separate webinar in Ramadan as the program continues. In terms of how to memorize, as we said, you have two ways of doing that. After you've done your 5 days of 100 repetitions, on that last day, you will read it 10 times again by looking on the memorization day, and then you will close the Mus'haf and try to read by heart. I think for many people, you will be surprised and you will find that you can actually read quite a bit. You may have the odd mistake in a verse, or you may need prompting here and there, but generally speaking, it will be good. If it's not so good, or you're finding that actually it's weak, then you will do one verse at a time. And every time you've memorized a verse by having looked at it a number of times and repeated it by heart a number of times, and you've done the second verse, you will connect the two together by reading it by heart 2 or 3 times together from verse 1 and 2. Then you go on to 3, memorize that verse, and then now you're going to connect it with verses 1 and 2 and 3. So you're doing it one verse at a time. Each time you've memorized a verse, look over the last two or how many verses you've already memorized in that section and connect them all together. Read it once by looking or twice by looking, then do it by heart once or twice. And in this way, you keep moving verse to verse until you have memorized all of them.
Okay, the next question, if I've understood this correctly, Sheikh, I have heard you mention 2 cycles a week instead of the one weekly cycle. Can someone join this program, but they want to do 2 cycles a week because the surah they want to memorize is relatively lengthy?
Yes, you can. You would only do this though, if you have like generally speaking, a good level of memorization already. So you can do that. If you haven't done this method before, or you haven't memorized a great deal of Quran before, you're not used to memorization, don't do this. Just stick to the method. And once you've established the method, over time you will be able to get to that. But if you're already someone who's memorized, mashallah, a lot of the Quran, a good number of juz, you're very good at memorizing, you have a good already cycle of memorization, you know how to do it, then yes, you could. Yes, you could. But I don't want to go into that detail now, because I think it might confuse people. But maybe if you if that is you, or there are some of you who can do that, then maybe inshallah ta'ala we can answer that question separately, just so that it doesn't confuse everyone else.
Okay, I'm a third of the way through Surah Al Imran. Some pages I've forgotten towards the end of this third. Shall I start on the next new page and start from there so I can continue on my journey but using this new method?
Um, so I think the method would be good for you to start like from a brand new page, simply because it will allow you to really understand this method. Because if you already memorized something previously, then it's more an issue of revision. Even if you've kind of forgotten it, but you're very familiar with it because you memorized it and committed it to memory already once. And so therefore, it's relatively easy in that sense. I would therefore suggest that you start again from beginning, and what you've kind of forgotten, that's something which you just need to, once you've learned the method, you could just apply it to that later on, inshallah ta'ala, and inshallah pick up that memorization there.
I usually use a recording app to test myself. What does the Sheikh think about this?
Yeah, so as I said, I think that's a good idea. So when it comes to testing your memorization, you should record it, right? You can do a voice note and then listen to it yourself. That's a good way of making sure that you've correctly memorized it. You can use post-it notes or something that to cover up the verse, and then you reveal it a verse at a time to make sure that you've memorized it correctly. So you can do like different things. I mean, I think all of those are valid.
Yeah, and the next question was, what are the Sheikh's opinion of the Tertil app? So I guess that's similar to.
The Tartil app, mashallah, is a very good app. It's an app where basically it recognizes, it has voice recognition, and then it will test you, or I think it like, so as you're reading, it will recognize what you're reading, and then it will tell you if you made a mistake or not. My only reservation with this app is the couple of times that I've used it, it's not always accurate, especially with some of the minute issues. So, for example, if someone says alhamdu or alhamdi, it doesn't always pick that up. So the do, the, da, those kind of vowels and those harakas, it doesn't always pick it up. That's from my when I tried to test it just to see how good it was, and from what other people have told me also. That's my only reservation, because in memorization, accuracy is extremely important. Once you've memorized, it is very difficult to re-memorize. If you memorize incorrectly, and that's what's committed to memory, it is very difficult to go back and re-memorize it correctly. And so it's very important that you are aware of that. So I think it's a good app, mashallah. I think they've done a fantastic job. I think if that's what you want to use, by all means, you're free to do so. I would just be aware of that issue. And so there's no substitute, I think, in terms of being able to read to a teacher. But if it's an aid that you want to use to help you, no problem. But I think just be aware of that. It does sometimes not always give you the best accuracy. And I think it's not necessarily a fault of the app. Maybe it's just, the app, the voice recognition software. People have different pitches, people have different types of voices, some are clearer, some are not. Maybe I don't really know the technology behind it, but that's the only thing I would say.
The next question, I want to relearn surahs from Juz Amma. Should I choose pathway 3?
Yeah, so if they're not from pathway one, then yes, you would choose pathway three.
Will we be reading the weekly target to the teachers or the old and the new? E.g., on week 2, will I read week 1 and week 2?
So, inshallah, this will be one of the webinars that were mentioned. So, when we speak about the revision cycle and how that's going to work, we'll tell you, inshallah, ta'ala, how that's going to work. I'm also saying that, guys, because this is a new program. It's the first time we're running something like this. When we launched Go Memorize, we thought we'd have, maybe 100, 200 people. Alhamdulillah, we've had major interest. Like, we hardly like advertised anything. It's just, subhanallah, by word of mouth. Allah's put barakah in this. And so the first week also is going to be a bit of trial and error from us. So we want to see how it works before we tell you how practically we can incorporate the rest of the cycle. So give us some inshallah time to see how it works inshallah, and we will tell you that bidnillah ta'ala very soon.
Okay, next question. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Do you have any advice for managing our time? Perhaps is there any good lectures or resources that you could recommend?
Yes, so managing time is obviously, when it comes to Quran, discipline and managing time is extremely important. I would say in Ramadan, you just have a good routine. So what you need to do for this program is find, as I said, either with the prayers, the daily prayers, or some other time when you can just spend 15, 20 minutes by yourself 2 or 3 times a day, and you can get these repetitions done. I think discipline is very important. I think also just planning ahead. So for example, if you know that in Ramadan, which we have like less than a week, may Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to witness Ramadan. It's a blessing from the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. uh, the month of Ramadan, if you know, for example, that in Ramadan you got certain tasks to perform, certain deadlines to meet, I don't know, you need to do certain cooking, I don't know, whatever it may be. Maybe try to get some of that stuff done this week, or at least be ahead of the curve, so you give yourself more breathing room. So batch cook if that's what you need to do. Plan things ahead. Maybe like do some work that that you have a deadline in Ramadan at some point. Well, start now. I know some people take off time in Ramadan. Maybe that's something which some people will do. You just have to see how best you can manage that, so that inshallah ta'ala you can commit to the program. So I think if you just plan your schedule a bit better, you manage your affairs slightly better, you juggle things around in a way that just gives you those pockets of time. That's very important. Pockets of time are so important. We often think that we take them for granted. So I have 15 minutes spare, and I think it's only 15 minutes. I'm going to do it later when I get more time. In 15 minutes, you could do three, four, five repetitions. That's all it is. So maybe, it's when you're sitting and waiting for something, or you just got a short break, and in Ramadan, even if you're working, in your break, in your lunch break, you're not going to be doing anything else. Like you're not eating or drinking. And so use those pockets of time. And if you use that, I think those 10, 15 minutes that we normally think, we can't do anything in, you'll actually be able to do a number of repetitions, and you'll easily, inshallah ta'ala, manage the program.
The next question, is it okay if I test myself daily?
Yeah, you can. I mean, as you're reading more, as I said, as you're doing more and more repetitions, you'll find that you can actually start to like already memorize some of the verses, or they'll come to you, if you just try to self-test. But again, don't do it in a way that puts pressure on you. So if that's going to stress you out, that's going to make things difficult, you're going to get like sad because it didn't work after day two, then don't do that. Just trust the program. But if, at the same time, if it doesn't make a difference to you and it's just something you want to try, yeah, no problem.
Okay, someone's asked the question in the comments. I am planning to finish the Quran this Ramadan. I'm guessing by reciting it. Should I put this on hold and memorize Surah Al-Mulk instead?
So, as I said last week, this isn't an either or situation. We want you to do both. We don't want this to replace what you would normally do in terms of reading the Quran. And this is again when time management comes in. I know that we're asking you for an extra half an hour to an hour, a day. Um, we want you to make that slightly extra commitment in Ramadan. So I know most people, inshallah, are going to read the whole Quran maybe once, maybe twice, maybe read half of it throughout Ramadan, whatever. That's something we want you to keep doing. If it is an either or, you have to make a choice, then that's the choice that you need to make depending on your situation, what you think is best. There is virtue in both. And no doubt finishing the Quran in Ramadan, some of the scholars said that it is extremely virtuous based on a number of hadith. Um, and so like the Prophet used to revise Quran with Jibreel alayhi salam every Ramadan. So based on the hadith, they said it's a good practice. So, it's good to do. For me, this program is never about an either or choice. It is about you trying to do both. Us trying to excel in Ramadan as we should, just trying to find an extra half an hour for the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ideally, you would still be doing Quran, you will still be reading whatever you were normally reading. If you're doing a bit of tafsir or translation, you would still be doing that. And now you're just finding an extra half an hour, 45 minutes to do some memorization as well. And that is ideally how Ramadan should be: a time for reading, a time for understanding and reflection, a time for memorization, and trying to match all of that.
Jazakallah khair. How do we implement this method for children who can't read Quran on their own yet?
So, if they can't read the own Quran on their own, you would break the verses as we will do with Pathway 1. You'll break the verses down and get them to repeat after you. So, for example, if they're reciting Surah Nas, you will say Qul, they will repeat after you Qul. A'udhu, a'udhu. Bi Rabbin Nas, bi Rabbin Nas. And that's how you'll see, inshallah, the videos that we do on Pathway 1. That's what it's going to be. So, you break it down word for word and get them to repeat after you. So, that's the onus is upon you to make sure. And they, by the way, do the same repetitions. They will do 20 times a day as well. So just because they're kids, we're not like, oh no, they only do 5 or 10. No, they have to do the same amount. Just a bit more work on your part. You need to motivate them, and you need to obviously go through those repetitions with them.
Uh, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Your page by page series, is it based on the 15-line Quran page length?
Yes, it is based on the Saudi printed edition of the Quran. So it is page by page. I mean, sometimes you do slightly less or slightly more depending on the meaning of the verses, but usually speaking, it is a page at a time.
Okay, this is the final question now. Should we use the same mushaf for the memorization for every repetition? So don't mix between the phone and the mushaf.
Yes, you use the same mushaf, but if you have the same version electronically, that's okay. So, for example, if I'm using the Medina printed one, they have an electronic version that on my phone. So it's exactly the same. What we want is the same structure of verses. So what you see in the physical mushaf is what you will see on your phone. So as long as it's the same, it's okay.
Okay, someone's posted another question. I recently memorized Surah Kahf because of reading over the Fridays. It is similar to this method, but I find that when I get stuck or have a mistake, I'm unable to fix it. Any tips on how to fix
Yeah,
my
so so
mistakes?
so the reason why you're getting stuck and you can't fix it is because you're only doing it once a week. So this method is similar to what you said. It is similar. For many people, Surah Kahf is familiar to them because they've read it so many times over so many Fridays, over so many months and years. But because you're only doing it once a week, that's why you can't fix it. So you need to, you would use this method, something similar to this, where you're actually doing more repetitions and therefore more, reading, and that way you would, inshallah ta'ala, be able to fix it. But inshallah, we'll mention more of these issues inshallah as we come.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I think we should close now. Is there any concluding remarks, Sheikh, for next session?
Yeah, so a couple of things, folks. First, Jazakallah khair for attending. I appreciate your time and your effort and your commitment. Number two, as I said last week, all that we're asking from you is commitment to this program. We have a lot of people on the Telegram group and others, and unfortunately, it's the case that often when we begin our programs, like we have many people in Islamic programs that begin, but after a week or two, a lot of people drop off. We just want you commitment. People are giving up their time and sacrificing their schedules for this program. I think it is just, like from good etiquettes and manners, if you've signed up, then that you, inshallah, stick with this program and commit to it. The other thing is that tomorrow, inshallah, we're going to have a sisters only session. So just as a extra session, just for sisters only. I know that we have a lot of sisters here that they have many questions. Maybe they want to know more about the method. Maybe they want to understand something more about how to choose a pathway or something. So tomorrow, I believe it is, we'll send out the time. I don't remember exactly now from the top of my head, but it's going to be evening UK time. I think around 7, 8 o'clock. Sisters only, though. So this will be a sisters only session, and it will be led by one of the main sisters that will be on the sisters side that will be doing the testing, one of the main people behind this program, inshallah ta'ala, on the sisters side. So she'll be doing that again. It will be on Zoom and it will be a sisters only session just so that if there's any questions, people didn't feel comfortable today asking certain things or wanting to understand, they can ask, inshallah ta'ala, and in the comfort of that. And finally, then, Monday's the day. So we begin. This is like, inshallah, less than 48 hours. So within just over a day, Monday, inshallah, we begin. Make your intention, purify it for the sake of Allah. Do it to gain the reward. Do it to connect to the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Do it to memorize the Quran for all of the rewards and virtues that brings. And ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He blesses all of you and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you success and the ability to not only finish and complete this program, but for this program to be a pedestal and a platform for you to inshallah memorize the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its entirety. Barakallahu fikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for the session, and to everyone, Jazakallah khair for attending. Please do stay in touch via the Telegram group, and all future sessions will be announced there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.